Welcome back, everyone. I hope you're doing well. We are in Gaul. No, not we, but Caesar. And that's what we're doing. Caesar in Gaul. Roman history documentary by kings and generals. We just did this entire, by the way, if you guys are new here, we just did this entire Caesarian / Roman series with Historia Civilis. It's on the channel. Go check that out. But this is going to be a little bit more in depth. Glad you're here. Hit that like button. Let's go. Let's go.
The Gauls were one of Rome's oldest and most bitter enemies. They had sacked Rome and throughout the centuries fought alongside the Republic's most dangerous adversaries, including Pyrrhus and Hannibal. By the end of the 2nd century BC, southern Gaul was largely subdued. However, there was still tension in northern Gaul, particularly along the Rhine. These tensions would ultimately climax in the Gallic Wars, the conflict that would shape the future of Western Europe for centuries to come, giving rise to the Holy Roman Empire and modern-day France. The conflict that would forever etch the name Gaius Julius Caesar in the annals of history. Rome had been rocked by almost half a century of civil wars, and the Republic was in decline.
What year are we in?
Both Marius and Sulla had marched on Rome, highlighting the ineffectiveness of the system for maintaining a large empire, and the fact that the legionaries were more
Okay, it says at the top right, 88 to 60 BC.
loyal to their generals
So this goes up right till when Caesar becomes consul.
than to the state. Following this chaotic period, 3 men had established an unofficial alliance to effectively control the Republic.
Let me see if my my memory serves me right. We got Crassus, Pompey, and Caesar.
This was the first triumvirate, consisting of the famous general Pompey the Great, the richest man in Rome, Crassus, and Julius Caesar. Caesar had been consul the year before in 59 BC, but his political campaigning had left him in debt and made him many enemies in Rome. He needed to make money fast and gain enough military success to keep his political adversaries at bay. When the time came for distributing provinces for Caesar to govern as proconsul, he was able to use his political allies to secure Cisalpine Gaul, Illyricum, and Transalpine Gaul for an unprecedented 5 years.
Which is really interesting because, you know, usually you get 1 territory, right? He gets 3.
This put Caesar in control of 4 veteran legions, the 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th, all of whom had fought with Caesar before in Hispania and were loyal to him. They had a total of roughly 22,000 legionaries, plus auxiliaries. Caesar now had the men he needed. All he needed was an excuse for war. Fortunately for Caesar, a Celtic tribe, the Helvetii, was planning a migration into Gaul in.
And that's where a lot of this begins, is like a lot of these Germanic tribes are just migrating west for better opportunity. And a lot of these allied Gallic tribes are like knocking at the door for Caesar to do something because their resources and territory is being expanded into. But yeah.
58 BC. Their leader, Orectorix, had formed a confederation with a number of neighbouring tribes, the Tulingi, Latubrigi, Rauraki, and Boii, and now they numbered 368,000 men, women, and children. Orectorix had even convinced them all to burn their homes in order to leave no option of failure.
Burn the boats! That's the burn the boats thing.
However, soon he was accused of being a tyrant and was forced to commit suicide.
Forced to commit suicide? Never heard that one before.
Command passed to Divico. Divico was determined to stick to the plan, and began amassing supplies in order to start pouring into Gaul. To do this, they would either have to pass through the land of the Roman ally Aedui and the province of Transalpine Gaul, or take the longer route through the mountain passes in the north. The Romans had built up a healthy fear of migrating tribes following the Cimbrian War in 113 to 101 BC, and so Caesar, hearing of this, was only too willing to come to the rescue of the Aedui. He took the only available legion in the area and force-marched them up to Geneva, destroying the bridge on the Rhone that provided access into Transalpine Gaul. The Helvetii appealed to Caesar, asking for military access through Roman lands and promising they would not attack. Caesar played for time, pretending to consider this offer for almost 15 days. Using this time, his legion was able to construct a fortified embankment almost 5 meters high, stretching 20 miles along the riverbank.
I missed some of that.
Using this time, his legion was able to construct a fortified embankment almost 5 meters high, stretching 20 miles along the riverbank.
5 meters high. I'm American, so not sure what that is. So sorry. I'll learn what a meter is. I'll learn what a meter is. But 20 miles long is crazy.
With the legion manning the embankment and now in a stronger position, Caesar denied the Helvetii access and refused to allow them to cross. Some of the Helvetii ignored this and attempted to cross nonetheless in small boats, but were prevented from doing so by the legionaries throwing javelins and shooting arrows into them. With the southern route thus blocked, the Helvetii decided to take the longer northern route through the mountains into Gaul. Leaving his top lieutenant, Labienus, in command, Caesar returned to Italy to levy a further
Labienus.
2 legions and to pull the other 3 veteran legions out of their winter quarters in Aquileia, bringing his total to approximately 33,000 legionaries plus auxiliaries. Despite Labienus being in a strong position to easily block the mountain pass, the Helvetii managed to push into Gallic territories and began ravaging the land. The Gauls pleaded with Caesar.
Yeah, they're not doing good for their case of being peaceful, are they?
Caesar to intervene and chase the Helvetii out, and Caesar, yet again, was only too willing to help, marching his legions into the Gallic territories. The decision of Labienus to not hold the Helvetii in the mountains was likely an order received from Caesar. The Celts were now in open terrain, which better suited the Roman legions, and their pillaging of Gaul gave Caesar an excuse to intervene.
Yep.
Word reached Caesar that the Helvetii were currently attempting a crossing at the Arar River.
How many are there? There's just so many. It looks like there's probably like 80,000 or something like that.
They had been crossing in 4 large groups, using many rafts and boats, but due to the size of the horde and their lack of organization, the crossing had already taken them days, and one group was still yet to cross. Caesar took his legions and swiftly marched to the river. Quickly forming his legions into battle formation, Caesar fell upon the Celts waiting to cross. Caught unaware, unprepared, and encumbered by their baggage, the Helvetii did not even have enough time to form a proper battle line. The fighting was over quickly, with the whole stranded group being killed or fleeing into the nearby woods, whilst the other 3 groups could do nothing but watch helplessly from the other side of the river. The main Helvetii force began to move on, and not wanting to lose the initiative, Caesar quickly built a bridge across the river and moved all of his 6 legions across.
So they're just like, there's not many places they can go at this point. They're gonna have to take a stand.
Crossing that had taken the Celts 20 days had taken the Romans just 1. Caesar began tailing the Helvetii, waiting for the right time to strike. There were a few minor cavalry skirmishes, but nothing decisive. Caesar did once manage to find a battlefield that was advantageous, and even had Labienus in position behind the enemy. However, due to poor communication from his scouts, Caesar was forced to pull back from the battlefield. This caused a delay in Caesar's plan, and he was beginning to run low on rations. He decided to head for the nearby town of Bibracte to resupply his army before continuing the pursuit. As he began to march off, however, Divico gave chase, harassing the rear of the Roman army. Caesar sent his cavalry and light infantry to fight a delaying action in order to buy time to deploy his main force on a nearby hill. The 4 veteran legions formed 3 lines at the front, with the 2 newly levied legions along with the auxiliaries positioned further up the hill. These men were not tested in battle, and so were not expected to do any of the fighting.
And that's what he did for a long time, is he had the green individuals in the back. And for the most part, they never saw much battle, but sometimes there would be give or take, and they would have to fight. They'd have to pick up the slack, or I think there's 1 or 2 battles in Gaul where he basically says, all right, my greens, my novices, whatever, they're going to take this flank, they're going to take this rear. They're usually in the rear guard, but
instead they were to guard the baggage and were spread thin across the hill to seemingly increase the size of Caesar's army. The Helvetii, numbering somewhere between 60 to 90,000 warriors, had successfully fought off the Roman cavalry and light infantry, forcing them to retreat. Now they had formed their infantry into a tightly packed shield wall and advanced on the Romans. The front 2 lines of legionaries opened the battle with a volley of javelins. These hampered the Helvetii by becoming stuck in their shields, forcing them to drop them and break into a looser formation.
Smart.
With the shield wall in disarray, the Roman front lines charged into melee. The fighting was intense and tough, but the Romans' discipline and experience gave them the edge. Slowly they began to get the upper hand, with the Helvetii being forced back to a nearby mountain.
They scaled backwards past a mountain? Wow.
However, as the Romans pressed up the mountain,
they're going to lose their advantage, and they're going to be fighting uphill.
A portion of the Helvetii allies, composed of B.C.E. and Tilingi, roughly 15,000 warriors, entered the battle. These men had been acting as a rearguard, protecting the camp, and now they fell on the Roman flank, threatening to encircle them. The Helvetii, bolstered by the arrival of their allies, began pushing back with renewed vigour.
Dang.
With the 2 front lines of legionaries already engaging the Helvetii on the mountain, Caesar committed his final line of veterans, which had been acting as a reserve.
Oh, yeah, the veterans as a reserve. Smart.
After hours of hard fighting, the Helvetii on the mountain were eventually broken and forced from the battle. However, the B.C.E. and Tilingi fell back to the camp to make a last stand. Using their baggage wagons, they formed a makeshift rampart and continued the fight, hurling missiles down into the Roman ranks. This is where the fighting was the most difficult, as the B.C.E. were famed warriors and fought desperately. Finally, after fighting long into the night, the 3rd line was able to break into the camp, ending the battle.
I bet that was just carnage, you know, they were in these wagons or whatever. They're fighting probably from the top of it, maybe with arrows, javelins, and just watching. It's probably paranoia, just blood, and just crazy stuff happening. Wow.
The battle had lasted almost 12 hours.
Wow.
Caesar had lost perhaps 5,000 men.
A whole legion.
Whilst the Helvetii had lost around 40 to 60,000.
That's insane.
Of the 368,000 people who began the migration, only 130,000 were now left.
I'm guessing the majority of those fled?
Caesar, with no cavalry to speak of, was not able to give chase immediately, and gave his men 3 days in order to recover from the battle before starting the pursuit. The Helvetii, seeing the Romans chasing them once more, surrendered completely and were forced to return to their homeland and made a vassal of Rome, acting as a buffer between Roman and Germanic lands. Caesar had achieved his aim of gaining a swift military victory, and for now he would be able to hold off his political enemies in Rome. Furthermore, the Romans had now shown themselves to be a powerful force in the Gallic theatre. After his victory,
wow, Beautiful. And that's where we'll stop today. As you guys may have watched many of my Kings and Generals videos, we do these in chapters just to kind of like really encapsulate what happened in that chapter. The Helvetii tribe peoples, depending on how you want to say, this is their little homeland below the Alps, kind of like the buffer between them and Germania. Cisalpine Gaul and Germania, and they just wanted to be a little bit more opportunistic here. I'm not sure. There's many reasons for migrations. Most of it has to do with food. Some of it has to do with encroaching enemies. Sometimes it has to do with like better opportunity for resources and expansion. Not sure their motivations, but nonetheless, Caesar is very much being the police now for the Gallic tribes. Now, not all the Gallic tribes are going to see eye to eye with Caesar because of this policing, but Caesar believes that he is the protectorate of this region, which is not Roman territory and not even close to Roman territory. However, it is slowly going to get built brick by brick after a lot of these instances that exacerbate the conflicts. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please leave some video recommendations down below. I'll read them all. Until next time, peace out. Bye bye.